Hi, everybody. Welcome to day 5 of the Sisterhood Intensive Healing the Divide. I'm so grateful that you have made time to join us here, and I'm delighted to be joined once again by my favorite hype woman, Vilma Ortiz, co conspirator and wonderful, wonderful professional feminist. How are you doing today, Vilma?
I'm great. I'm using my radio name Vilma V more than anything.
Vilma V.
Just so, but great. I'm happy
Excellent.
to be here.
I am so glad you're here. And if you're joining us online, please say hi if you would like to. I just want to remind everybody that this is being recorded, and it will live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So please don't post anything or make any comments that you wouldn't want to be searchable online. And also, I just want to give a content warning. This is going to be a heavy duty class. We're going to be talking about intergenerational trauma and lots of things. So this is not going to be a light class. So I just want to let you know about that. But I think it is something that we really need to talk about. So let's go for it. Today's course is on becoming Cyclebreakers and Changemakers. Thank you, Alchimandi. Hello, Charles Phillips. Oh, hi, Savan. Yes, thank you so much for being a part of it. I really appreciated what you were sharing yesterday, Charles Phillips. And Savan, thank you so much for watching all of these. That is so kind of you and really, really greatly appreciate it. So as we do, we're going to start with a little meditation because this is a very heavy topic, and we want to just take a minute to really come into our bodies and feel a part of things. So I'm going to tune this. Oh, I'm trying to turn this music off. Let's see here. Okay, there we go. Okay. So I want us to really absorb what this image is saying. I think so many times these systems of oppression try to confuse us and try to make it seem like we are the problem, when no, they are the problem and we are the solution. So that's what we're going to meditate on today. We're going to just do some simple inhales and exhales. And as we inhale, we're going to say, you can say it verbally or you can say it inside your head, I am not the problem. And then as you exhale, we are the solution. Okay? Okay, are we ready to go? And we'll do some deep breathing together. Let me put it back on the chat here. Okay, awesome. Okay, everybody breathe in. I am not the problem. We are the solution. I am not the problem. We are the solution. I am not the problem. We are the solution. I am not the problem. We are the solution. Welcome, everybody. We're so glad you're here. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for tuning in. How was that meditation for you, Vilma?
I loved it. I think that's such an important point. We are the solution. This is a problem. We don't have to blame. There's a problem out there. It's a solution that we can access. We are the solution.
Yes, yes, exactly. So, welcome everybody to the Interracial Sisterhood Challenge Day 3. Um, the Interracial Sisterhood Coalition creates opt in, safe, generative spaces outside of the workplace for women to listen to each other's stories, learn how to relate across differences equals so that we can unite across difference and secure our collective safety and freedom. Hi, Amy. I'm so glad you're here. And we do this through in person events. We also have an interracial sisterhood retreat. I'm going to show you an image in a moment. This is the interracial sisterhood retreat in San Francisco in 2024. And you can see beautiful Vilma there and me down there. Hi. And we have one coming up in Barbados, November 6th through 10. We would love for you to join us, and I'll be happy to share the information about that. Actually, Vilma, can you put that in the chat or yes, okay, awesome. And we also have a white woman cohort, like an online small group coaching program specifically for white women. We would love for you to be a part of. And there is the stunning La Maison Michel in Barbados, a Black woman owned luxury villa where the interracial sisterhood retreat will be taking place. We have just a few spots left, and we would love for you to join us in Barbados for these days of intense healing, but also joy and relaxation, beautiful rest in a completely patriarchy free zone of this incredible luxury villa. So please join us in Barbados. So the interracial sisterhood, the first day of this series, which was Monday, we started off by talking about what is interracial sisterhood. And this is how we define it at the Interracial Sisterhood Coalition: a lifelong embodied practice of women of different ethnicities and generations respecting and supporting each other and making change together. Interracial Sisters center, follow, protect, resource, and support leadership by marginalized women, including Black and Indigenous women, trans and queer women, women with disabilities, immigrant women, Muslim and Jewish women, under-resourced women, and women with intersecting marginalized identities. And I want to make it clear that trans women are welcome in our spaces. And when we do our one-off events, all people are welcome. Men, gender expansive people, you are all welcome at our in-person events. Not for the retreats, we keep it to women, all self-identified women. But thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. And then yesterday, we continued that to really talk about the origins of our racist and patriarchal beliefs and how to leave them behind, or as we talked about yesterday, how to clean out our mental junk drawer. We talked about how racism and patriarchy operate on many levels: internalized, interpersonal, institutional, and systemic. And as I mentioned, we talked about getting into in our junk drawer in our minds and looking at our beliefs to see, is this a belief that is serving me, or is this a belief that is harmful and inaccurate? And continuously doing that, because things tend to accumulate back into those junk drawers. And so it's not a one-time process to clean the junk drawer out. So today we're talking about becoming cycle breakers and change makers. And this is so important because we use the word embodied to describe interracial sisterhood because this is not like an intellectual exercise or like check the box, I do one, two, three, and interracial sisterhood happens. We are all carrying tremendous intergenerational trauma in our bodies, whether we are descended from uh, uh, people who survived enslavement, people who survived land theft, genocide, or we descended from the people who inflicted enslavement, the slave owners, and basically all white people who participated to uphold slavery in some fashion, or who participated to support and inflict land theft and genocide of Native people. We are all carrying that trauma through to today. And I really consider it our responsibility as people alive today to do all we can to heal from this intergenerational trauma and not continue to inflict it going forward, to become cycle breakers and change makers. And that's what we're going to be talking about. As I mentioned, it is a heavy duty topic. Just want to warn you about that. And also that if you put comments in the chat, you know, this video is going to live on LinkedIn and Facebook and YouTube. So just be mindful. If you want to put comments in the chat, go right ahead. But I just want you to be mindful of that. So one other thing we talked about is how the people who profit from institutional and systemic racism and patriarchy will never change racist and patriarchal institutions and systems. It's going to take a movement of people like you and me to create new institutions and systems and make those obsolete. And I know you've been reflecting a lot on this recently, Velma. Do you have some thoughts here?
Yeah, I think that we know that prior movements, the civil rights movement, women's suffrage movement, have been led, particularly, the civil rights with Black women and Black folks. And I think this one, because so many like immigrants are under attack, Black people already are dealing with so much mass incarceration and over incarceration, it really needs to be people who are in a more privileged position to create the world that we know in our hearts is possible. I don't think we can I don't I don't think white women and white men can expect people of color to step in again. And just in case people didn't realize, I'm Puerto Rican. I know I'm very white presenting, but I'm a Puerto Rican woman.
Yeah, and I I have a slightly different view on it. I mean, I think that definitely people with the most privilege, white men, white women, we have to be the ones putting our bodies on the line, uh, going out into the streets, um, taking risk, okay, to actually confront the rise of authoritarianism. However, I don't think that we should create the institutions and systems of the future on our own. I think that we should be there to resource, protect, and support leaders of color who have always led our country in the right direction, but have been under resourced and made vulnerable by this and have been assassinated by white people for leading us in the right direction. So that's how I kind of see that unfolding. But I think we share a similar vision, Vilma.
Yes, I agree. The world, the new world that we know in our hearts is possible will be multiracial, it'll be anti-racist, it'll be feminist, it'll be womanist, and it'll be based in equity and inclusion. Never
Of
mind.
all people.
Yes, for everyone. And yeah, so I think
Yes,
we have
white
similar.
people included. We're
A
not.
100%. You mentioned yesterday, it's not like people are trying to come over, people of color, white people to to people of color aren't trying to get power so they can exact revenge on white folks. It's to create that just, equitable society. Yeah,
Yes, where we will all thrive.
that's the dream.
That is the dream, and I'm sticking to it. So thank you, Amy, for sharing that link to the podcast interview. That was a really great podcast. I really appreciate you having me on Women Making Moves. So I wanted to share with you. I don't know if folks are familiar with the Bobby Harrow cycle of socialization. Bobby Harrow was a professor in Springfield College in the Department of Education, and she created this framework for understanding how we are socialized, which very much aligns with what we were talking about yesterday in terms of how we're born into this world and then we see the things around us and then we start to believe those things. And she said that we are born into this world with mechanics in place, but we're not to blame for that. We have no consciousness, we have no guilt, we have no choice. But within the center of this cycle of socialization is fear, ignorance, confusion, and insecurity, because this is the tool of the oppressor. They want to make sure that we feel fearful, ignorant, confused, and insecure so that they can keep us on this cycle of socialization. So we're taught on a personal level by our parents, relatives, and teachers, the people we love and trust, shapers of expectations, norms, values, rules, models of way to be, the sources of our dreams. They become our role models. Okay, this is how I'm supposed to show up in the world. And then that's reinforced uh, by messages from institutions like churches, schools, TV, the legal system, mental health, medicine, business, and within the broader culture, the practices, song lyrics, language, media, patterns of thought on conscious and unconscious levels. So it seeps into us so deeply that we're not even aware that it is there. And then it's enforced, sanctioned, stigmatized, rewards and punishment, privilege allocated to those of us who uphold systems of oppression, and persecution directed at those of us who dare to challenge systems of oppression, which results in dissonance, silence, anger, dehumanization, guilt, confusion, ignorance, self hatred, stress, lack of reality, horizontal violence, where we're attacking people at our same level within the hierarchy, internalization of patterns of power, unless and until something happens that makes us change, raise our consciousness, interrupt, educate, take a stand, question, and reframe. But if we don't undergo that change, we do nothing, don't make waves, and promote the status quo, and then we raise the next generation in the same pattern of oppression that we have been socialized to throughout our lives. She calls this the Bobby Harrow cycle of socialization. There's a wonderful whole article about it. You can Google it and download it. I highly recommend it. But Bobby Harrow also gave us the cycle of liberation. So when we decide, when we have some kind of moment, she calls it a critical incident that creates cognitive dissonance, then we start to see the world in a different way. We get ready. We feel empowered by our self introspection, education, consciousness raising, um, and we start to question things. We start to form connection. We start to reach out. We move out of ourselves toward others, and we seek experience and exposure, speaking out and naming injustices. And again, we start to take stands using tools, exploring, and experimenting. And it's interpersonal. We change in how we value others and see the world. We start to build community, working with others, people like us, um, for purpose, and people different from us. We start to build community and coalesce. And from that coalition, that is how we create lasting change. And that change that we then maintain continues, and we start to move in this cycle of liberation. And at the core of the cycle of liberation is self-love, hope, self-esteem, balance, joy, support, security, having a spiritual base, authentic love of others, not an abusive love, not a, I want to have power over you, but I want to have power with you. This is what we are working on at the Interracial Sisterhood Coalition. And Vilma, people in the chat, I had to make this big so I can't see this. All people, yes, Amy, all people will thrive 100%. Vilma, do you have thoughts on the cycle of liberation and cycle of socialization?
I think it's a very good thing to put out there so that, it's already been studied. I've read that we do know how to get along, how to resolve conflict, how to equitably share resources. And it's just a matter of the knowledge being transmuted to people so they can act on it. So these are great visuals about a pathway. And sometimes we're so confused, like, how do we get there? But people have already thought this out. And it's a matter of transmitting it, implementing it, having your heart space in it. So I appreciate this.
Oh, thank you so much, Vilma. And what's interesting is that we're sharing this on social media. And what do social media companies thrive on? Anything that drives attention to social media, namely conflict,
Yeah,
right?
the negative engagement. They don't
The
care about, they
negative,
want, yeah, yeah.
when people are angry, that's when they comment the most. And so there is built into social media companies trying to keep us on the cycle of oppression, of fear and anger and division, right? So social media is also a really powerful tool for learning positive things and for connecting. I have built such a community of like-minded people that I met on social media that we would not have actually met in person. But we have to also be careful about what we are being exposed to and what we're participating in when we engage in social media. So, with that said, I'd like to ask people, what is keeping us stuck in the cycle of socialization, and how might we make the leap to the cycle of liberation? And I'd love to hear from people in the chat what is coming up for them. And if you have thoughts on that, Vilma, I would love to hear them.
Well, one thing I think people need to be invited in. I think people don't are, we're more and more lonely and siloed and feeling isolated. And these great protests like No King's Day and other things that get us in the street talking to each other and breaking through that isolation. I think those are important ways. And I appreciate, even watching someone on YouTube like you discuss this, but then there's ways to also plug in and be part of something. I think that's a good way to start, at least.
Yes, get together in person, and if you're feeling lonely, sad, isolated, etc., I want you to think about who are two or three people you care about and reach out to them, right? Because chances are they're feeling the same way too. And we have so much power when we come together. But that's exactly why they want to keep us uh, um, They want to keep us isolated from each other, right? Because they don't want us to get to know each other, as we talked about yesterday. So Amy is saying all people, old patterns. Yes, we are stuck in old patterns of behaving, lifelong conditioning, what we've been rewarded and punished for our entire lives, like we saw on that cycle of socialization, our lineage, yes, who our family members were, who our role models are, who what we observed in the workplace would allow us to succeed or to fail. Colette says lack of opportunity to meet others outside of our environment and domains. 100%, Colette. And someday we'll have to share the story of how Colette and I met. But I will say this, that those of us with more privilege have to be the ones to really initiate most of the time. Okay. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about tomorrow, is how do you initiate in a way that earns trust? Because if that first interaction does not go well, there's not going to be a second interaction. But we saw that yesterday in the stats on how white Americans' social networks, we're talking about their friendship network, is on average 90% white, and 2/3 of white Americans' social networks are entirely white, and how that is harming everybody.
Yeah, and to look at the comments, Beverly mentions like who is the they, so that we could stay very clear when we're talking about they and the other. That makes a lot of sense.
Thank you, Beverly. Yes, that is great. Okay, let's keep going. Racism and patriarchy aren't just belief systems, they are systems of oppression enforced by violence. And we all carry intergenerational trauma in our bodies from our ancestors who experienced this violence or who inflicted this violence. Let me come back over here. And I think that is a major part of what is keeping us. Internet is self-medicating, and hours spent in isolation, even when you're in public, even when you're riding the bus, even when you're in a park or some beautiful place. People are like this, not talking with each other. Everybody's like gazing into that little, what do they call it? Dark mirror.
Yeah, and I even think sometimes young people are even getting more socialized to not interact with strangers on a bus or in a park, and they find like they're not even accustomed to it. So
Oh,
it is
yes.
a social change happening.
Yeah,
That's not good.
my teenage kids, like, if they need to ask for something for someone, they will ask me to do it because they feel incredibly uncomfortable talking to someone they don't know. It is so strange to me. Like, they're so used to only interacting, um, via the phone. Who do you think are the people trying to get people not to solve these issues? Great question, Beverly. I believe it is the billionaires, and soon to be on November 6th, I believe it is, the Tesla board will vote on a compensation package that will allow Elon Musk to become the world's first trillionaire, right? It is the people who are profiting from our division, which is a tiny, tiny handful of people who are accumulating just tremendous, tremendous wealth and power. Even in this first, it hasn't even been a year of the Trump administration. The Trump family has made like $5 billion. Okay, through crypto and all these other things. This small group of very, very wealthy people are accumulating tremendous wealth and power. And what they most want is that everybody else is so busy fighting with each other and trying to oppress each other that we never unite because we so vastly outnumber them. If we were to unite, we could transform everything. So that's why they invest so heavily in teaching us lies and hatred and dividing us and rewarding certain ones of us who will come up and align ourselves with them and punishing the ones who try to do anything to call them to account. And that is, those are the people who are doing this, the people who profit from it. So, in summary, early conditioning, fear of conflict, exclusion, lack of awareness, role models, alternative perspectives, internalized beliefs, institutional reinforcement. Yes, so many of those things. Um, and I would add intergenerational trauma. And I really encourage people to look at the work of Resmaa Menakem, who's written My Grandmother's Hands, another book called The Quaking of America, who talks about how racial harm, racism, what he defines as white body supremacy, is not just a thought pattern or an ideology. It's something that we all carry in our bodies and through intergenerational trauma. And that is what we're going to have to work on healing from, because it's not just me changing my beliefs um, about Black people, Native people, Puerto Rican people, Asian people. It's how I actually show up when I'm interacting. And because so much of racism is conveyed in body language. It's not even verbal. It is the way I take up space, it's the energy I bring to the space, it's my facial reactions, it's all of these things, right? So we have to work on healing from our intergenerational trauma, and I'm curious what you have to say about that, Vilma.
I think that is really one of the most important things is sometimes we're not dealing with everything on a conscious level, but there's a subconscious, there's a collective unconscious. And again, this is not something we're taught, but it's something that we've lived. And I think there's been a lot of work in the Black community and in other communities to try to deal with that, because this also has been studied and proven, the generational aspect and how it's something that we're born with. Like you're in your grandmother's womb or that thing about being pregnant. And
Yes.
so yes, I'm not saying as articulated as you have, but I do believe this is another thing that needs to be addressed and uncovered and dealt with in order for us to create this new world that we know in our hearts is possible.
100%. And Beverly, I love this comment. They are obviously playing us, and it's time we wake up and support each other 1000%. Thank you for that comment. That is exactly what we are talking about. So, when we go into, in particular, the relationship between Black women and white women in this country today, why are the interactions between Black women and white women often so fraught? I learned a lot about that from reading Dr. Stephanie Jones Rogers' book, They Were Her Property, which is a history of white women as slave owners in the American South. And honestly, this book is so brutal. I could only muster to read like a few pages at a time, because it really shows how white women were not passive beneficiaries of slavery. We were intimately involved in every aspect of it and did really diabolical, evil things to Black women in particular, Black children, Black men. Um, and it's documented in a lot of detail in this book. And so when we're interacting today, Black women and white women, it's not just us in the interaction. It is Black women and everything their ancestors experienced at the hands of white women, and white women and everything our ancestors did to Black women. And so their ancestors are whispering, be very careful. This woman, could result in your death or inflict tremendous harm on you. And my ancestors are whispering in my head, you better put her in her place and keep her there because you do not want her to hold you to account for all this stuff that we did. And I think those are the things that are playing out in our heads subconsciously when we interact. And I really encourage white women to read this book and really understand the depth of our depravity that we inflicted this terrible violence on Black women for hundreds of years. And where, not all of us may be descendants of slave owners, but all white people in that time benefited or participated in slavery in some way. Very, very few white people actively rebelled against slavery and called for abolition. Most everybody else was pretty much okay with it or directly benefiting from it. And that is still in our blood. And those dynamics are still present in our country today. We basically have transferred the plantation has now become the corporation, and the dynamics of the plantation are very much the same in many workplaces.
Yeah, and I want to echo a comment that Colette just left where it says it takes intentionality and an incredible amount of work consciousness to combat these generational ideologies. And I'll just add, yes, of course, and it takes us as a group to surface them and to talk about them and to create spaces for them. So I appreciate that comment.
Thank you so much, Colette. And Colette, thank you for being my friend and mentor and guide in so many. My life is completely transformed because of our relationship. I really, really, really appreciate and value you, Colette. Um, okay. Now, interesting. When I first started going down this path, I tried to distance myself from white women as much as I possibly could. And many of my mentors were like, no, you need to go back to Europe and you need to learn about what your ancestors experienced in Europe before they moved to this country. And I was like, my ancestors are the oppressors. I want to get as far away I don't want to learn anything about my ancestors. But when you start to hear the same things from so many people you deeply respect, you're like, oh, well, maybe there's some maybe I should do this. And I really think a friend of mine who introduced me to Sylvia Federici's book, The Caliban and the Witch, which I highly recommend people read, um, is a history of the witch hunt, which lasted for hundreds of years. Okay. And Silvia Federici is an Italian uh, uh, professor of history. She's a Marxist professor. And she documents how, as capitalism expanded in Europe, it coincided with the expansion of Christianity and also with the relegation of women's roles. So prior to this, in medieval society, yes, there was patriarchy, but also women held a lot of power, and they had collective lives in some ways. They were midwives, they were healers, they were spiritual leaders, they were ale makers. That's what the witch's hat comes from. Those were the ale makers, and they tended animals and crops collectively. They weren't all isolated into little individual houses. Then when capitalism expanded in Europe, the lords took over all the land, the landlord, and they essentially made everybody become sharecroppers, and they relegated them to these little individual plots of land. And then they said, oh, yes, and men are superior to women, and you have to do what men say. And almost everything you raise on this little plot of land, you have to give to the Lord. And the women who were like, "What? I do not want this. I reject that. Um, this is not how I wanna live." They called them witches, and they, subjected them to violence, public violence. The whole town would come out. They would often strip them naked, lead them through the town. Everyone would laugh and jeer at them. And then they would do things like dunk them in water, basically waterboard them, or, burn them at the stake, or throw them in the river and say if they drowned, they weren't a witch, but if they floated, they were a witch, and then burn them at the stake. And they would put their children to sit in the front row to observe this happening. So, what did women learn from this? And think about how many fairy tales we read it as children is about witches, right? We learned that our survival depended on our allegiance with violent white men, and that if we tried to defy the system or speak out, we would be subjected to tremendous violence. And this gave me a lot more empathy and understanding of why white women showed up when we came to this country. Because they continued the witch hunt in this country. Let's all remember that part. I'm not trying to say this to justify the terrible things that white women have done to Black women, but I definitely learned a lot about the origin of white women's behavior by learning about this history.
And I want to say, as someone who was born on Halloween and has just reclaimed the word witch, and I'm happy about being a witch, I love the acronym, and I'm going to claim you as a witch right now here at this in this gathering, is a woman inspired to teach our collective history. So thank you for doing this,
Thank
Karen.
you. Thank you so much for that. I accept that honor. Thank you, Witch Vilma V. Let's see. Whoa. Yes, intergenerational trauma, great addition. That's a big one. And as a biological scientist, I can't help but wonder about the epigenetic side of it too. Whether intergenerational trauma leaves measurable molecular or gene expression changes, yes, that influence behavior and stress responses. Thank you so much for raising that. Yes, I think it's called our telemeters. It's like a part of our brain that gets affected by trauma. It actually changes and rewires our brain. And I also really appreciate why can't I think of her name right now? But the wonderful book about um intergenerational trauma among Black people. What what is her name?
Syndrome, slave syndrome. Is it that
Yes,
one? The
post-traumatic slave syndrome.
yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. Highly, highly, highly recommend. Okay. So trauma changes how people think, feel, and behave. Literally right before this, I was I was having therapy with my therapist, and I was talking about some trauma that I experienced, and she said this phrase and I was like, "Oh, I'm going to add that to the deck." Yes. Yes, our trauma influences how we see the world, how we feel about others, how we feel about ourselves, and how we show up during our life. And I wanted to share this diagram of trauma responses, and I'm curious what people see when they look at these oh, thank you so much, Beverly. That's very kind of you. Yes, tomorrow will again be at 4 o'clock Pacific, 7 Eastern. It was only today because I had the therapy appointment that we did 5 o'clock. Okay, let's look at this. Trauma responses. Fight. I think we're familiar with the fight response, to face any perceived threat aggressively, or flight, to run away from danger or threat. And I think these are go to trauma responses of people who have faced severe trauma, right? Intergenerational trauma. They may be inclined to fight or flight because they know what could happen next is literal death, right? Whereas I think that white women, when confronted with a traumatic event, our tendency is to freeze, fawn, to please someone, to please the oppressor in order to avoid conflict, and to collapse, to become unresponsive or faint, or just kind of disappear into our comfort. And I'm curious what you think about this, Vilma, and also folks in the chat.
I think it's a great evolution. I know before we were all taught about the fight and flight, and then now I think it's added more the freeze, and I've been familiar with that. And it's interesting to see the flop and the fawn. I think it can be very individual. Obviously, if you've, your upbringing and what your parents told you about responding to threats. So it's very complicated, but I I appreciate it that it's evolved and that people can more easily see these different responses, and they're not just limited to white women or to, everyone has their different response, but this is a great way to map it again, to make what is sometimes subconscious or not, to surface things, to make it so that we can discuss it and really deal with it. So I appreciate this, and I realize it's evolving, and it's really good info to have.
Yes. Curious, does anyone in the chat have reactions to this? Um, okay. So this all leads to my all-time favorite. um oh, thank you. As a white feminist, I would rage out, become a white savior. Now I lean in and get curious. Yes, that's it, Amy. Amy said the most when she interviewed me for a podcast. She said, I can't remember, I am a recovering white feminist. And it was I loved it so much. Thank you, Amy. That is the perfect tie-in to what we're gonna share next. Audre Lorde, Black feminist, revolutionary, mother, poet, lesbian, one my all-time favorite human being.
Mine
Back
too.
yes, back in 1980, she gave a talk at Amherst College, and it was shortly after the patriarchy succeeded in preventing the Equal Rights Amendment from getting ratified. So the United States is really unique, I think, among developed nations that there is no overall legal framework that making women equal to men. So they tried to ratify the Constitution, which is a huge process. You got to get 36 state legislatures to vote yes. And back in 1979, it kind of all fell apart. Interestingly, Virginia has since passed it. So it would be a constitutional question if they promulgated it and said we have a equal rights amendment. But of course that did not happen. But Audre Lorde was talking to a group of women about why did the Equal Rights Amendment fail to get ratified, and why, in general, women's progress in this country has been so very limited. And she critiqued white feminists as being only interested in their own story of really not trying to learn or listen or be in community with Black feminists, brown feminists, any women whose life stories were different from theirs, of being very much isolated in white women with great privilege, wealth, striving to get equal treatment in the workplace as men, for their own individual advancement and not for the overall collective of all women. And she said, our greatest challenge, why our movements have been unsuccessful, is because we have no patterns of relating across difference as equals. We only know how to operate in hierarchy because that's all we've ever seen role modeled. So we've seen role modeled over and over again that to be white is good, to be Black or brown is bad. To be thin is good, to be larger is bad. To be um heterosexual is good. To be queer is bad. To be financially well off is good. To be under-resourced is bad. So we've never really seen what is it for women with all these different lived experiences to actually relate across difference as equals. And that's why every time we get together and try to make social change, we wind up splintering from each other and dissipate the strength of our movement. And she said, if we're going to be successful, we are going to have to create those patterns of relating across difference as equals ourselves, because there's no one out there showing us how to do it. We're going to have to be the ones to create it. She said that back in 1980. It is still true in 2025, y'all. I refuse to let this pass to the next generation. Let's get together and figure this out. And it's let's actually have fun too. This is not just a terrible thing. I saw this great TikTok video about how the revolution you want starts at the party, starts at dancing together and drinking together, smoking weed together, all of these things, right?
Yes,
Let's
yes.
get to know each other and have fun together so that we're actually excited to do something together.
Yeah, and I think what people have commented, the intention, which is what I really enjoy about your efforts and your work, Karen, is you are seeking, not this isn't for everyone, but for the women out there who really want to create an intentional interracial sisterhood, you've created a space for that because yes, we need it. And if you have the intention, there should be a place for it. And I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much. 100%. If this does not appeal to you, please, I completely understand. Obviously, 92% of Black women voted for Kamala. They warned us what was going to happen. They moved heaven and earth, raised millions of dollars, did everything they possibly could to get her elected. And again, for the third presidential election in a row, the majority of white women voted for a serial rapist of white women. We have a lot of work to do. But for the white women who want to do the work, let's all work together. Let's all do that work. Let's actually transform and welcome in our other siblings into this movement, and let's figure this out. And for the women of color who want there to be an interracial sisterhood, who see the benefit in that, let's have a space where we can opt in and actually be together and work on these things together. And let's see what happens. I think it's going to be great. I think it's going to be awesome. And it's not as if this has not happened in history. Like in the 70s, there were consciousness raising circles. And that was basically it. Women sitting around a kitchen table, sharing their stories, learning to name racism, patriarchy, sexism as the cause of their problems, educating each other, doing political education, and making change together. That's what I think we need to bring back. What is clear in this time is that people who carry the most privilege bear the most responsibility to change and shift our behavior so that repair can become possible. Yes. And we should not expect Black women, Black people to put themselves on the front line. We know what will happen if they are there. They will be killed, they will be severely harmed. It is time for white people to put ourselves um, on the front line to make these changes. And I know there's many roles. Some of us are not drawn to protest. We need many different types of skills. Storytelling, community building, cooking, making meals, all kinds. There's something that every single one of us is uniquely good at, and we can apply that to this. Colette Lucky says, those women are suffering from Stockholm syndrome. So perhaps we need to address that component. How does one heal from Stockholm syndrome? Wow. Thank you for raising that, Colette. I mean, it is interesting. An organization that works with white women, particularly rural white women, on political issues, they studied the white women who voted for Trump in 2016. And what they found is they broke down into three categories. There were white women who voted strictly with their pocketbook and think that he was going to be better for their family and their finances. There were white women who were in a traditional marriage where the man is in charge of the finances and the politics, and the woman is in charge of the house and the kids, and he tells her who to vote for. Um, so there was that group. And then there was a third group, many of whom were themselves victims of sexual assault or of um, domestic violence, who had developed this Stockholm syndrome, who had a very strong allegiance to their families, found protection within their families, and in particular, did not want their sons to be, quote, falsely accused of sexually assaulting someone. And they felt that there was something about Trump that made them feel safe. I don't know how one gets out of that, and honestly, my heart goes out to those women. There's a really amazing, actually, former MAGA Mormon woman who is, she's a YouTube and TikTok influencer. I highly recommend watching her videos because she does explain how she got indoctrinated into this ideology and how she finally broke out of it. But yeah, it is very intense. Um, okay. Reflections, thoughts, anyone want to pipe in here?
When you had the picture of Audre Lorde up, I was thinking of ABC. A for Audre Lorde, B for Bell Hooks, and C for Kimberly Crenshaw. And I believe we could probably go down there because we need to look to other women who thought about this, who spent time studying this, and wrote tremendous books about it. We don't have to reinvent this. We just have to reshare it and create spaces about it. And I think this, yeah.
Correct. And I would add, like we talked about in the first class, the Iroquois women, the true matriarchal societies that existed in this country for hundreds of years. And yeah, we have incredible models. We don't have to invent things out of thin air. They are there for us. So as we wind down, because wow, we've been going for a whole hour. I don't want people to post this. Don't post this answer. But these are some reflection questions that you can do some journaling about. That To kind of close out this session. What is some intergenerational trauma I carry in my body? Have I experienced trauma at the hands of another person? So, my own direct experience with trauma. Have I caused trauma to another person? What becomes possible in my relationships when I heal from this trauma?
That's a big one. That's a big one.
Yes. Yeah. That is huge. Um, that's literally what I was just talking to my therapist about. Because I will say, I mean, just from my own experience, I've experienced wage gap, I've experienced glass ceiling, I've experienced sexual harassment in the workplace, but by far the most um, traumatic workplace experiences I have come from other white women in the workplace who perceive me as a threat to their proximity to the white men in power and did all they could to squish me down. Um, so yeah, it's deep. What are some patterns of relating across difference as equals I would like to see? And what are some patterns of relating across difference as equals I would like to be? Those are questions as we round this out. White women in particular, if you want a small group coaching program where we work on these issues with other white women, I encourage you to join Becoming Trustworthy, my online small group coaching program for white women. We're going to be creating a new cohort very soon. So if you are interested in that, please reach out to me. I would love for you to be a part of it.
And also, I was unable to put in the chat the Barbados because I just found a link that linked to the Michelle Maison. So
Oh,
I'm
okay. Yes.
apologize. So
I'm gonna pull it up. I'm gonna go to interracialsisterhoodcoalition.com.
okay.
Um, and that's where you can get information about the Barbados retreat. You can also DM me for the um you can DM me for information, but that has information about our online membership community, the Interracial Sisterhood Retreat. You can join our mailing list and download our guide to interracial sisterhood. It's all, you can contact me too on that interracialsisterhoodcoalition.com. We would love for you to join. Look at that. This is not a AI photo, y'all. That is an actual beach in Barbados. That is where we're gonna be. I'm like so excited hearing Bob Marley coming in from the cold. I'm gonna have that playing in my earbuds as we land in Barbados. It's gonna be amazing, and we would love for you to be a part of it. So please do reach out. There's only a few spots left, and we would love for you to be there. And then tomorrow, come back for day 4. This one is about initiating trust across difference. As we mentioned, people with more privilege, we are going to have to be the ones to initiate relationships. And then how do we actually do that? Okay. And we'll all culminate in building interracial sisterhood on Friday. I can't hardly wait. Yay! And I just want to say thank you so much, Vilma. I appreciate you so much. Thank
Thank you. I want to tell people they can find you on LinkedIn. You're heavily on LinkedIn. And then I'm also a radio programmer on KPFA 94.1 Community Radio. You can find the show I produce, Women's Magazine, every Monday at 1 p.m. on kpfa.org if you're out of the Bay Area.
Yes, you can. You don't have to listen in the Bay Area. You can listen online at kpfa.org. And I just popped that in the chat. And I just want to say a special thank you to Amy Pons, who really inspired me. She's like, Karen, you can do this. You can do a 5-day challenge. And I just thank you so much, Amy. We really, really appreciate you. Thank you for having me on my podcast, on your podcast. And thank you so much, Colette, for joining us today, and to everyone who joined today. This is so awesome. You give me so much hope and courage. And I believe that we will secure our collective safety and freedom. And listening to each other's stories is how we will get there. So thank you. And until tomorrow, bye, everybody.
Adios.